Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Learn, Lead, Transform. I'm William, and today I have the pleasure of sharing an interview I had with my friend Morag Barret. Morag is a highly accomplished keynote speaker, leadership development expert, and best-selling author of two books. The first is Cultivate, The Power of Winning Relationships. The second is The Future-Proof Workplace. Both well worth the read. Very, very good books. Morag is the founder and CEO of SkyeTeam, a boutique leadership development firm, and has supported more than 15,000 leaders from 20 countries on 4 continents. She's helped them achieve outstanding results by improving the effectiveness of their leadership teams. So today, this is going to be a discussion that we had about high-performing teams, and I think you'll find it very enjoyable and very informative. So let's get to it. Hi, Morag. Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time today.
My pleasure.
So, sake of transparency, we've known each other for about 5 years. We met 5 years ago.
We did indeed. I remember it well. You were our room moderator for a marathon emotional intelligence series where we had like 5 minutes between sessions where we had to reset and redo 5 times. And you were a stalwart. You laughed at all our jokes, even on the 5th go around.
Team player, right?
Just absolutely.
And I modified my introduction each time. So it's great to be able to talk to you about this topic of high-performing teams. And so to begin, I wanted to kind of frame the conversation so that we have like a common language, at least for our conversation here today. And I have an open-ended general question. How would you describe a high-performing team?
Well, I know for the teams that I'm on, the ones that I have the fondest memories of, and I would include SkyeTeam, my company, as a current high-performing team, is it's the one where you look forward to going into work, where you're having fun, but maybe a little scared at the same time. Because a high-performing team is one that isn't coasting, it is raising the bar, but doing it in a way that everybody on the team thrives and grows together. And of course, we're going to explore on the opposite side, the ones where there's the finger pointing and blame. But for me, how do I describe a high performing team? It's one that I look forward to in the morning, getting up and going to work with.
That's awesome. Yeah. It kind of goes along with a topic I've been reading up a lot lately called the deliberately developmental organization, where every employee is developed every single day. And it's more of that mentor team development where your team helps you to grow and to learn and challenge you until you master your role. And this is the scary part, once you master that role, you're moved into a new role that'll challenge you, right? So, but the benefit of that is you have the opportunity to master pretty much. If you stick with an organization, you can master every department in that organization, which makes you an extremely valuable executive if you rise up to that level.
Well, it just makes you an extremely valuable organization. I remember in my earliest career when I was working in banking, I became a bank manager, a pillar of the community, and I had 22 employees over 2 branches that reported to me. And when we actually sat down and looked at it, not only did we not have enough chairs for everybody if they came into work, whole different story. But of those 22 people, there were only at the start of my leadership 2 that could do more than their own role, which meant that if somebody was off sick or if somebody was on vacation, then we had a gap that could be difficult to fill. And so we embarked on a cross-training exercise where everybody got to learn at least 1 or 2 other responsibilities so that we had increased flexibility. And one of the consequences of that was that branch, or those 2 branches, went from lowest performing to top performing in the region. But going back to your opening question, went from a group of individuals that happened to work in the same location to more of a cohesive team because we were connected in new and different ways. So everybody wins.
That's amazing. I think we've all had those experiences, right, of team in name only. So you all work on the same work group, maybe a better way to put it. But yeah, and like one I worked for, you had to schedule your vacation time around your deadlines because there's nobody else who could step in and take over your work. And to my knowledge, they never changed that. So
Okay.
good for you. So what qualities would you say are common? You've discussed some of them, but which qualities are common to high-performing teams?
Well, when I'm working with teams, we focus on two what banking was all about. However, on the other side that needs to balance it, it's the human side. It's the who we are and how do we relate. And between those two, if you neglect one or other, you're going to be unsuccessful. It's why I now do the people side of business. I moved from numbers and spending hours looking at balance sheet and cash flow forecasts and, hey, we're all going to be rich. I've got this great widget or service. But when the leaders of those organizations didn't focus on, to your point, the daily learning, the alignment, the goals, the training of their teams, they were unable to deliver the numbers that their forecasts were showing. So for me, it's looking at the transactional, the systems, the processes, the what we're doing, and coupling that with the how do we deliver it around connecting the hearts and minds of the people.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I when I'm working with people, I focus on the hearts and minds. You've also got to get the hands involved, right? Because
Yeah.
people got to do the work, and the heart. So excellent stuff. So let's look at if you're building a high performing team and you need to bring some people in from the outside. What would you consider some best practices for hiring members into a high performing team?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, what are you seeing from the work that you're doing, William?
Well, and of course, with my background with the organizational psychology, it seems like a lot of people hire people who are qualified according to the job description or the experience on the resume, but they don't really take into account how they're going to work with other members of the team. I think there's some really good assessments out there that can be used, and there's no right or wrong answers on these assessments, right? It's not like a test in high school or college, but it helps to find out, you know, what's your preferred working style, what areas are your strengths in if you use like a competing values framework. And I think those are great tools, the great starting point to find people that will either make up the weaknesses in your existing team or complement the strengths for the strategy that team has, and most likely to get along. Of course, you still need to get in touch with them and interview them and get a feel for it too. But I think some assessments, there's good ones and there's ones that maybe are not so good. But there's some assessments I think that can help at least get that process started.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much richness in what you've just said and so many different ways you can take it, because assessment tools, yes, have a point, but they are a small data point. And I think the risk is that we go looking for that special shaped piece to fit into the team. And all it will tell you is, I'm right-handed. It doesn't tell you how neat my handwriting is going to be. It doesn't tell you whether I can distill complex thoughts down into easily accessible and inspiring communications. It just tells you I'm right-handed. And that, I think, can be the limitation of a lot of these tools if they are used in isolation. Because as you said, the next piece then is hiring and the interview process. And so certainly a thoughtful approach, which goes beyond the, oh my goodness, it's 10 o'clock, William's coming in, I'm grabbing your resume, I'm reading it as I'm going in. And I say, so William, tell me about yourself. I mean, and how many times have we gone through interview processes where I meet you and you go, so tell me about yourself, Morag, tell me a little bit about your history. And then you go to interview number 2 and the person's going, oh, hang on a minute, tell me about yourself. And you're like, but it's written down. So having a planned and thoughtful hiring process where we might say, William, I want you to interview them for their technical skills because you are our lead subject matter expert. So you check that what they've written on the resume, they've got that experience. Morag, you understand what it takes to build a high performing teams. I want you to understand about style and fit. And John, I want you to interview for emotional intelligence. What happens under pressure? Now, when we sit down, the 3 of us, to review our notes, we've got different lenses by which to say, is this person, A, to your point, going to fill gaps we don't have? Are they going to also, like a Venn diagram, complement the team, or are they going to drive us all nuts, or vice versa? And what else new are they bringing to the team that we wouldn't otherwise have? And so when you've got a high performing team, I go with the expect the unexpected. So don't hire for looks like me. That's the mistake we've been making for decades.
True.
Don't go looking for the perfect fit, because it just doesn't exist. But if you can look at it from those different lenses, the technical skills, the people skills, the what's new and different, like for me, I'm on my 5th career. There's all sorts of hidden talents that my current job title would disguise. That's how you start to accelerate the momentum behind your team as you bring on new players.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think one mistake that people make with assessments is people love to do like the online personality assessments and things, right? But when you bring it into the workplace, people just do maybe the assessment piece and that's it. So they don't know necessarily how to interpret the results, especially if it's, a more scientifically valid assessment. And they're not using the system it was designed to. Like, you can't use an assessment that's designed to test work styles to try and find the love of your life. It's not going to work.
Relationship you're looking for, but
right. It wasn't designed for that purpose, right? And I'm thinking about a specific one, but I'm not going to name it. But you have to use it for what it's intended to. You have to know how to interpret it, or hire and train someone who does, right? And hopefully there's some robust systems behind it to help with that. But even then, it's just a small piece.
It is a small piece, and it frustrates me often when they become the one and done. Oh, I've done DISC, or I've done Myers-Briggs, or I've done my whatever it might be. But it then goes in the drawer, never to see the light of day again. And the key, I think, for this, for most of them, is less about, is it accurate to 2 decimal places? And I say this because I'm developing my own profile right now to go with my first book, Cultivate.
Right.
But here is, does it spark a conversation? Does it elevate understanding about how you and I are going to work together so that we can be more successful together? And if it can become a regular used tool as part of that conversation, then I think it adds value. But if it's a one and done, never to see the light of day again, then I would question, do you actually need it?
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's fair. And, to go back to an early point, the idea of teams that help develop each other. If you get someone in on your team who's not open to growing, and they're out there, there's people that they know it. I've seen it with several older accountants. They've done accounting all their life. This is all they want to do. They don't want to learn new tricks. They don't necessarily want to learn how to get along with everybody. I mean, they typically do get along with other accountants, but if you are on a team that values growth and development continually, no matter how good that person is at their job, they're not going to fit on the team very well. All right, so let's move on. My next question is, how important is it for team members to have clear goals and goals that closely tie to the priorities of the team and the organization?
Well, common sense says you'd be crazy not to have alignment. But it's interesting between there is a gap between the illusion of clear goals and the actuality of clear goals. And I remember I was working with this senior marketing team, 9 people on the team, William. And the number one thing is, okay, focus. Why does this team exist? And, how does it contribute to the mothership, the greater success of the organization? And, oh, no, we're fine. We're like this, Morag, no worries. Let's move on to the next section. And I was like, okay, poke the bear. Let's test this. I said, okay, I want you all to individually write down the top 3 priorities that this team must absolutely deliver on between now and next 6 months. I can't remember the time. It's relatively short though. So your top 3 priorities that this leadership team, this marketing group is required to deliver. How many items do you think came on that list, William? 9 people.
Oh no, 3.
Well, that might be the aspiration. If you've got a truly focused goal, you're going to
Yeah,
have 3, aren't you? We ended up
right.
with 27.
27.
27. And then it was,
Oh,
then we got into the, oh, well, no, 3 and 5, they're the same. We've just worded them differently. And 9 is the same as 2, and it can't happen until after 8. So I go,
oh, where's the clarity?
we'll play semantics. So we whittled down this list to 15. And here's the thing, it wasn't top 3, it wasn't clarity. And that's not to say that those 15 or 27 things aren't important and still have to get done. But when you don't have clarity around what are the most important things, that's when we end up with subpar performance or missed milestones. And if we aren't absolutely clear on these are the 3 things we need to do, and here are the 2 things that are as important as they are next year or not, they become what I call black ops projects. They're happening below the desk. That's me going below the desk with the camera. They're happening in secret, which is still diverting resources and effort away from the top 3. So high performing teams, they're very clear on what they need to do, must do, but they're also very clear on what they don't do or won't be doing yet.
Yeah, that's very good. And strategies change too, right? So some of those further down the list may not even apply 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road.
Well, exactly. And at SkyeTeam, and I'm terrible at this, so I spent 15 years in banking, as I said, looking at cash flow forecasts, all of that. And I talk about wishes, ponies, and unicorns whenever I'm told, you know, well, have you got a strategy? What's your strategy for SkyeTeam? 3 years. Who knows? It's all crystal ball, especially in the rate of change in the 21st century.
Yeah.
Trying to plan for something even 3 years out feels a little unicorny like in terms of, well, anything could happen. So do we have a plan for the next 12 months? Absolutely. Do we have priorities where we're closely aligned? Absolutely. Are we totally aligned? No, because Morag still has her secret projects that cause me to be distracted. But here's the thing, we do have a vision and focus for the period of time that works for our industry. And then beyond that, it's not that I use hope as a strategy, but I trust the process. After 14 years, I have some proof that past performance leads to future performance.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, you know that I teach at a university here in Phoenix, and it's an undergrad class, and they've spent, so my class is one of the last ones they have to take to graduate, but throughout their college career, they've taken tests and assessments that are pretty black and white, yes and no, true, false, essay, copy the answer from the book, put in some of your own words. But my class is strategic management, and there's no tests, there's no yes, no, it's all written. They're writing a business plan in effect. And they have the hardest time with the concept that you can't form a plan today and expect it to work in 5 years. The world doesn't change.
Yeah, because the youth of today, I would have thought, are more used to this idea of pace of change and technology and innovation and new things popping up, seemingly out of the blue. Because of course, we only ever see the tip of the iceberg. We don't see all of the hours and effort and years beforehand. But yeah, agile, I mean, as a technology concept and an iterative approach to software development, to me, just made sense right from the get-go. Why wouldn't you build, test, adjust to get to your end goal? And I think that is a methodology for life, for business, for careers right now, which is, it goes back to what you said earlier. Am I continually learning and growing? And if a new opportunity moves me sideways or provides me a completely new start, seize it. Because certainly for the 21st century, that ability to reinvent ourselves versus getting stuck on, as you said, the CPA for life, which is what I was at the beginning, the finance person for life. In order to stay ahead and competitive, we need to be adding to our toolkit, both of knowledge, skills, experience. Curiosity is what's going to drive success, and continuing to iterate. So a 3, 5, 10-year plan, job titles for 3, 5, 10 years. They don't even exist today. So how can I hang my hat on that's what I'm going to deliver? Instead, let's look at the skills, what causes me to thrive. Let me do work that taps into that, and that will get me to wherever it ends up being in the future.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. You're going back to what your background in finance, right? And I have an accounting degree. It's not on my resume. The reason it's not on my LinkedIn profile, and the reason it's not is because people kept reaching out to me for accounting roles. And
yeah,
I hate accounting. I don't like the work. And there's accountants in my class too. And they're like, why don't you like it? And I'm like, well, my personality is not a good fit for the there are people that are very strong in it, and I respect them, of doing the exact same thing over and over, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. And my personality is more like a Labrador retriever. So it's like, today we're going to talk about squirrel.
okay.
That's more like, I get distracted easy. I need variety and I need to talk to people. And in the accounting roles I was in, it was, your job doesn't require you to talk to anybody. Right. In fact, my last review, and I'm still very good friends with this person, but my last review, she told me, you'd be a great accountant if you would focus and stay in your chair. And I'm like,
see, it's interesting because I have a different reflect, because I'm also a bit of a Labrador retriever and a squirrel, and I like the distraction. But what I loved, because I studied applied mathematics at high school, I love the poetry that comes from numbers. And there is something, because there is a right and a wrong answer, and algebra, you know, when you had to get with x plus y equals 3, I used to love those because they're like little puzzles to find out what z is worth, etc. And I love it. Now, do I want to be locked alone in a library environment with endless spreadsheets and numbers? No, which is why I've pivoted. But I think that's what makes me and my team such a powerful combination. We bring that analytical, logical mindset to what actually terrifies more people, which is the squirrely soft skills.
yeah.
But ultimately, there is no career, no business, no project that cannot be undermined by a lack of care and attention in the human side, which is why
Absolutely.
you and I are now focused on that.
Yes, yes. Yep. So we could talk about that forever, but let's move on to the next question.
Okay.
So how important is it on a high-performing team that team members have well-defined roles and responsibilities?
Well-defined. Depends on the team.
Okay.
So here's the thing, when well-defined becomes rigid, you run the risk of politics, silos and turf wars. This is my swim lane, this is my kitchen, I'm going to mix all the metaphors now, get out. It also runs the risk, certainly as you move more senior in your career, that I am the queen of my swim lane, my well-defined role or function, and that is all I bring to the table. My finance perspective, my human resources perspective, my operations perspective. It's a one size fits all, and that can be the downside. You need clarity to avoid things falling down the cracks and not getting done. You need clarity so that we can look at the transitions. I mean, I remember working with one technology leader who says, you know, my team and I are developing this code, we throw it over the fence. I have no idea if there's somebody the other side of the fence to catch it or whether it's getting integrated. I'm not getting any feedback. Well, that's a downside of a well-defined roles and responsibilities. And at a leadership level, when I'm working with executives, there's two hats. There's the swim lane, the responsibilities that you bring to the table. Those are almost the table stakes. We assume you know how to run a finance team and HR team. But when you're sitting at this executive table, when you're sitting at this vice president table, even at a senior director level, you need to start to have an awareness, put your other hat on for the cross-functional business perspective. And that's where well-defined roles and responsibilities start to blur, because it encourages me to challenge your thinking. Just because we've always done it that way, William, maybe the time is for change. just because we've always sourced from that vendor, maybe the time is different. How do we move from a local supply chain to a global supply chain? How do we move from a global supply chain, as many companies have had to do, to a local one? Because when the global supply chain is broken, we need a backup plan. And so that's where well-defined yet loosely defined, I think, is the secret sauce to high-performing teams.
Okay, so I want to build on that. I love that.
Okay.
So the foundation of employee management has always been a good job analysis and building a good job description, which is where the definition of the role comes from. So do you think that needs to change in our current, or what would a good, maybe this is a better way to ask it, what would a good job description look like today in our current dynamic environment?
So for me, and this is just the Morag versus the world, the challenge with job descriptions is that they came into existence. I mean, I'm thinking about some of the really big companies, and they're linked to compensation and levels and stuff. They've become very rigid. And you can see how it's morphed, because the job description is used for the hiring, which was one of your initial questions. Yes. And if you look through it, and it says minimum of 3 years experience and 5 PhDs. And you're thinking, this is an entry-level role. I'm sorry. Right. How many years experience and how many PhDs? And if your entry-level role is requiring a bachelor's degree, then something's gone wrong. It's too rigid.
Yes.
And so for me, again, yes, do I need to have clarity around what am I being hired to do? Well, it's about the results. And it's not just the results, the dollars or the number of widgets I'm making. It's the how. Let's be clear about, am I doing it as a solo person, but with clean up on aisle 13 because I'm leaving damaged relationships everywhere? Or is it very clear that I'm expected to collaborate, and if so, with whom? And so I think there is an opportunity for us to refine the job description from what it has become into what it needs to be for a more knowledge economy, a more agile economy, and a more 21st century, where it is like my colleague, Dr. Sarah Beth Burke, has just written a book about hybrid careers called More Than Your Job Title. And again, job titles and job descriptions are all about, there's your box, stay in it. And it goes back to roles and responsibilities and swim lanes. We need boxes with dotted lines around it that allow them to morph and connect more clearly with the job next to it.
Yeah, that's really great. So I'm going to say something. You tell me what you think about this. So I think part of the challenge with job descriptions are, well, first of all, they should be the minimum that someone needs to have: knowledge, skills, abilities, and then other characteristics to just step into the role.
Yeah.
But I think often they're written for like the idealized employee who's been there for 5 years in the role. So I think that's a challenge. But I think the bigger challenge is most HR folks don't like writing them, first of all. And I think they don't like writing them because we haven't really trained people to write good, proper job descriptions, which are more flexible, like what you're talking about. So what do you think about that?
Well, I'm going to just challenge you and say, why is it human resources responsibility?
Oh, solely it shouldn't be. I mean, it usually falls on them, right? It usually, I'm like, I want to hire this person, write me a job description so I can post the job. But it should be a team effort. It should be
a team effort, because your finance person is the expert in finance and the results that need to be achieved and the sort of skill set, background and experience that's needed. And it's the, oh, you're the human resources person. You're responsible for engagement. You're responsible for high performing teams. I am just a consumer of your wisdom and experience. And it's like, no, it's a partnership.
right.
It's a partnership. It's the and.
Right. And I think ideally, each department that that person is going to interact with should be part of it.
Yeah.
Well, it's like one place I worked for years ago. Well, and this happens in many. The traditional HR is more about protecting the organization and enforcing policies than really focused on the people. And so what this company did is they split their HR and what they called their performance teams into 2 different departments.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So performance was training, development. So when HR had a performance issue with an employee, more often than not, what I witnessed is they went straight to discipline and termination, and the performance team was never notified that there was a performance issue. And they should have been, because in my mind, the first effort should have been to bring in performance to help strengthen this employee and get them on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure. I agree with you that HR needs to change and adapt and grow and kind of morph into something that's more applicable for today. How do we get them to do that?
Well, it's two sides. It's not just that HR may need to morph, it's the business needs to recognize that we're more than hugs and lollipops. That if the only time you reach out to your HR business partner is when things are going wrong and you have a performance issue, then that tells me that both sides of that equation are flawed.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, in my career, and my career now is more than 30 years old, which shocks me. My finance career retired itself 21 years ago. I mean, like, where does the time go? And for me, even in those 30 years, I don't think I can point to a single person where I can say hand on heart that their intent was to get up that morning and to make a mistake, to be a performance issue, to not meet expectations. Most of us go to work because we have to, we've got bills to pay, and hopefully because we're on that high performing team I started with, because we want to, we like the people, we like the work we're doing. And so when missed expectations happen, usually it can be as basic as I just didn't know. And I think back to my own career when I left banking, which was, I think when I finished, it was 9 to 5 where we were open to customers. But when I started, it was 10 till 3. The working day was 9 to 5. And I joined this new company and I would leave the office at 5 to go and get the 6 o'clock train home. So I would be home by 7:30 and then get up at 6 a.m. to do the commute into London again. And after about 3 months, a colleague of mine said, "Why do you keep leaving early?" And I'm going, "I'm not leaving early. I'm leaving at 5 o'clock. Well, I'd missed in the onboarding documents that because this company was headquartered in the US, the office hours were actually 9 till 6.
Oh.
So had this colleague not said, "Why do you keep leaving early?" I would never have known. I would have continued. I would have been that performance issue that could eventually have had the sledgehammer of, you're out on your ear. So first of all, we have to check, to your point earlier, roles and responsibility or results clearly communicated? Is there an opportunity for misunderstanding? All right, now I know what is expected of me. Do I have the tools and the resources and the training and the equipment to do it? And if that's done, then are there processes, systems, or barriers that are getting in the way? And ultimately, is it because I just don't care and I'm just not going to do it? Attitude. In which case, all right, well, that's back to the hiring thing. You asked the wrong questions to know that I was a surly person and I wasn't going to fit into your team or environment. But most often those performance issues is because you never articulated it, or you didn't check I understood it, that you didn't provide me with the training and resources to do it, and then you didn't remove whatever systematic barriers there were to performing at that level. And that is a different way of doing performance management. It's how do we help you learn and grow? One of your very points earlier on, versus punish and punitive, which is where many performance improvement plan legacies have ended up being. It's the final checkbox before we escort you out.
Right. Yeah, very true.
It doesn't need to be that way.
Doesn't. So kind of playing off that a little bit, how important, and you've talked a lot about this, but how important is trust and respect on a high performing team? And so I'll let you address that and kind of transition into, and then how do you handle it on a team like that when you have a major disagreement between maybe 2 or 3 players?
Oh, so there are layers. There are layers in that question, William. So if I go back to my first book, Cultivate, The Power of Winning Relationships, trust, psychological safety is described by Amy Edmondson, critical to success. Google's Aristotle research around what makes for a high performing team. If I don't trust you, then I'm not going to bring my best self to the team. I'm not going to take informed risk. I am not going to be vulnerable. It underpins everything. All right. And when I'm working with leaders, when I'm doing my keynote based on the book, etc., I'll ask, well, okay, so there are 4 questions we ask ourselves in every interaction. Can I count on you? Can I depend on you? Do I care about you? And do I trust you? Now, those first 2, can I count on you? Do I depend on you? Go back to my banking career. You do your stuff, I'll do mine, we'll be okay. It's the difference between reactive, get your stuff done, proactive, give me the warnings of impending disaster. But again, you stay in your box, I stay in mine, we'll be fine. Well, we've already discussed in the 21st century, that's not enough. So yes, to the second 2 is all about how business gets done, the relationship. Do I care about you? Not in a group hug, trustful sort of way, but do I care about your success as much as I do my own? Am I willing to give you the feedback you need to hear, not just what you want to hear? So the tough love, as well as the yay, go William, congratulations on that great result, promotion or whatever. And then ultimately the trust piece. And I'll get into conversations with leaders around how do you get to, yes, I trust you. And they'll say, well, prove it. You come and work for me for 2 years and then I'll decide if I trust you. And I'm going, well, this is just, you don't have 2 years. And in the olden days when we got on aeroplanes, you'd trust the pilot without even knowing was it male or the pilot, male or female, until they make the announcement.
Right.
You never even see them. And yet you withhold trust from the people who you see the whites of their eyes every day. This is madness.
It is.
So then your question is, okay, so if we accept it's those 4 questions, and it's not just, do I trust you, William? It's thinking about, do you trust me? It's a 2-way thing. So how do you get there? You do the thing that most business leaders avoid. You sit down and you have that conversation on a regular basis. Whether it's, hey, William, I know we've known each other for 5 years, but I was listening to this podcast episode between these 2 people and they were talking about trust, and it got me thinking about our relationship. What's working, what's not? What can I do to help you to be successful? Oh my goodness, that would be so powerful.
Right.
Or you're hiring somebody new and welcome to my team. Tell me about your career to date. What was it like? What was your boss? What did you like about your past boss? What didn't you like? Well, here's what you can expect from me. This is how I define success. How should I bring you bad news? Because at some point I'm going to have to give you feedback.
Right.
Blah. Let's talk about how we work together, not just the work we need to do together.
Right.
That's how you do it.
Yes. And I think it's critical. I love what you said. I used to encourage managers to, I still do, but I'm not in the corporate setting anymore, to don't just, your interactions with your employees should not be just about their work, or specifically should not just be about how they mess up, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to mess up and need correction along the way. But I always encourage them to find out one personal thing, a hobby. I'm not asking you to adopt them like a stray cat. Just find a hobby, just something that you can connect with them on and start, because trust should be more than I trust you to do your job.
Mm-hmm.
Trust should be, I trust you enough that as my team member, I can be vulnerable with you when I need to be, and
Mm-hmm.
you can support me through the difficult times too.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's easy to be a high-performing team or a great colleague when everything's going well.
Right.
The true test is when it hits the fan and the project's going off the rails and you're missing milestones, or you've got an angry customer on the phone. That's the true test. And inexperienced leaders and teams will throw out the rule book with the best of intent. I'm just trying to save the day.
Right.
I'm sorry I didn't call you, William. I didn't consult with you. I didn't have time. There was a fire burning. Well, no, that's when we should be reinforcing those rules of engagement and communicating even more consistently. And that's the difference, because we don't always talk about it. We assume that you've been doing this for 15 years, you've got your PhD, William, or nearly got your PhD. You know how to do it. There's your desk, get on with it. Well, yes, you do. But why wait 2 years for you to learn how to do it on this playing field for the sake of sitting down and having a conversation now and agreeing together and making the implicit explicit?
Yeah, and I think that when you have that kind of high trust on a team, when the team fails, maybe it misses a deadline, or the project, we didn't get that contract, that stuff happens, that we can then stop and ask ourselves, okay, this was a failure. How did I contribute to that failure?
Exactly.
And how can we make sure that that doesn't happen, or at least lessen the likelihood of that happening the next time around, right?
That goes back to your opening question around what makes for a high-performing team. How important is trust and respect in terms of when we disagree? Because on a high performing team, you and I can disagree.
Yeah.
And if we choose and make it explicit that our disagreeing, and I've worked with leadership teams like this when I've been to North Slope, Alaska and gold mining and stuff, where we're going to get in each other's space and we're going to curse and call each other out and shout and bang on the table. Well, fine, if the innocent bystanders watching this aren't going, oh my goodness, I hope I'm never in Morag's crosshairs. If they understand that's how we disagree, fine. If when we leave the room, whether it's the Zoom room or in person, and I'm going, wow, I better understand where William's coming from, and this is what we've agreed. I didn't agree to start with, but I'm behind it now. That works. It's when we go out of the room and I go, you won't believe what William just said. I won't
Right.
And then the next time I'm coming to meet with you, I'm either coming ready for a fight to put you in your place and get even, or I'm holding back because I'm intimidated, scared, or whatever. Either way, performance suffers. So in a high performing team, in what I call in Cultivate an ally relationship, it isn't all skipping through the daisies. We have those tough conversations, but we do it in a way that preserves and strengthens the relationship versus dents and damages it.
Yeah, that's great stuff. This has been a great conversation, and I have one more question for you. What are we not talking about related to HR and high-performing teams that we should be?
Stress, anxiety, burnout. The mental health challenges that we are all experiencing, because I know I've experienced it, I know my team have experienced it, and we teach this for a living. It's the how are we doing? Not what mask am I wearing and not what pretense, but the how are we doing, and how do we get that conversation to be more how we do business, acceptable. Because if we aren't investing in how we feel in our own presence, let alone how do others feel in my presence, if I'm not being thoughtful and deliberate about how I show up or who I need to be in this conversation, whether it's the talky one or the reflective one, the decisive one or the collaborative one, then how do we know if we're doing our best? What results are we leaving on the table? So that's the conversation. It's the how are we feeling as well as what are we doing?
Yeah, and I think that's really important because, I mean, there's that old business adage, I guess, that we don't bring our emotions to work, right? It's still in some industries, but I mean, the truth is we know a lot more about our brains than we did 50 years ago, and we can't make a decision without emotions. So we totally need to bring them to work.
Yep. I remember in banking being told it's not personal, it's just business. Well, business is personal, relationships matter. And if relationships matter, they come with all of the emotions. And therefore we need to find a way, not necessarily to like each other, but to work respectfully together. Because without it, everybody suffers, whether it's the business or individual leadership careers and reputations.
I think that's a great line to leave on. So thanks so much for your time today and all this insight. I really enjoyed this.
This was great, William. Thank you.